Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. To get daily new and amazing stories for you, subscribe our channel and press bell icon. All right, let's begin. Sand hissed under Kale Stravik's boots as the patrol crept along the ridge. Night vision turning the world into a grainy, green ocean. The air smelled of diesel and iron. A coyote yipped somewhere past the wire. Then even that sound died, like the desert was holding its breath. Kale raised a fist, the squad froze, and in the pocket of silence a runner appeared. Ramirez, chest heaving, holding out the sat phone as if it burned. "Secure line for you, Sarge." Kale's stomach tightened. Secure lines at this hour meant death or something worse. He ducked behind the Humvee shadow, pressed the phone to his ear. Static scratched, and then a woman's voice, brittle with panic, broke through. "Sergeant Stravik? This is Dr. Klein at St. Bart's. Your son is in the OR, broken leg, trauma, probable concussion. We're stabilizing." The world pinholed. For a second, Kale saw nothing but his kid's lopsided grin and the crooked tooth he kept promising to fix. "Ow!" His voice came out gravel. Another click, another breath, then a smaller voice, thready and shaking, slid onto the line. "Dad!" "Liam. Alive." Kale's knees nearly gave out. "Mom's man. He chained me in the barn." Words like metal. Kale closed his eyes and saw with slats, a rusted ring, a dark place nobody had cleaned since the divorce. He swallowed the taste of iron. "Where's Mom?" he said, not to scream. A nurse's voice cut back in, the line blurred with motion, doors, orders. "We have to take him now. He's in good hands." The phone went dead. Kale stared at his own reflection in the Humvee's window. Helmeted, dust-streaked, eyes that had seen plenty and wanted to see nothing ever again. He was already moving when the flap of the ops tent snapped open and Captain Dyer strode out, map under his arm, jaw like a locked vice. "What's your status, Stravik?" "My son's in surgery." Kale didn't bother hiding the edge in his voice. "He says Vance chained him. In the barn." Dyer's gaze flicked once, assessment finished. There were rules here, requests, forms, a ladder of approvals. Dyer shredded them with a breath. He put the map down, leaned into Kale's space so only he heard, and let the order fall like a hammer. "Go." No speech, no pep talk, just that one syllable, heavy with permission and consequence. Around them, the platoon pretended not to listen. Ramirez stared at the stars. Someone checked a magazine that didn't need checking. Kale nodded once. His hands had started to shake, rage more than fear, and he flexed them until the tremor stopped. He moved like a checklist. Rifle cleared and slung. Pack stripped to essentials. Dog tags tucked. He paused at the edge of the tent, the desert wind cool on the sweat at his neck, and for a heartbeat the barn came back. The day he'd moved out, Mara swearing Vance would help fix their old life. Liam quiet in the doorway, eyes tracking Vance instead of Kale. He had told her then, careful, measured, don't leave our boy alone with him. She'd laughed too quickly, the way people laugh when they're afraid to admit they're afraid. Birds spinning. The crew chief yelled over the rising thump of rotors. Kale jogged toward the pad, grit lifting in sheets, hot exhaust slapping his face. The Black Hawk hunched like a beast eager to run. Inside, red cabin lights painted everything the color of alarm. The crew chief strapped him in. Kale didn't feel the harness. He felt chains against bone. He felt a small hand clutching a phone. He felt the way Liam had said Dad, like it was both a plea and a promise. Dyer appeared at the ramp, one hand on the frame to steady himself against the rotor wash. He held Kale's gaze, then tapped 2 fingers against his temple. Think, in his chest, then act. An old ritual between men who'd crouched in too many doorways together. Kale returned it. The ramp lifted. Night swallowed the ground. As the helicopter clawed up into the dark, Kale closed his eyes and laid the mission over the map of home. Hospital first, then the house, then the barn. He pictured the hasp, the bolt cutters, the smell of hay. He pictured Vance's face, the half-smile he wore when he wanted to look harmless. The engine's roar became the drum of his own pulse. He didn't pray. He did what soldiers do when prayer won't reach. He made a plan, he counted the steps, and he promised himself he would keep moving until his boy was safe and the chain that had touched him was snapped. The Black Hawk rode the night like a blade through cloth. Inside the red-lit cabin, Cale sat rigid, helmet in his lap, the thump of rotors counting out the longest minutes of his life. The crew chief shouted an ETA over the noise. Cale didn't answer. He traced a path in his head. Hospital, house, barn. Chains. Bull cutters. Liam's voice saying Dad like a lifeline. They dropped to a National Guard strip, the skids kissing concrete. An MP sedan waited with the engine running. Cale slid in, rifle case across his knees. Streetlights blurred by. Low warehouses, empty lots, a billboard shivering in the wind. The city felt too quiet, as if it knew something had been taken from it. St. Bart's emergency glowed white and clean against the black. Inside, the antiseptic air hit him, bright and cold. A reception nurse looked up, saw the uniform, and stood. Sergeant Stravik? Liam Stravik. 9. OR. The word scraped. She nodded quickly. Dr. Klein's expecting you. She led him through double doors that breathed like a lung, down a corridor lined with sleeping televisions and vending machines humming to themselves. A security guard, bored eyes, square stance, watched Cale pass and straightened. Dr. Klein met him outside a glassed-in family room. She was small, precise, hair pulled back so tightly it sharpened her features. Sergeant, your son is stable enough for surgery. Tibia fracture, possible concussion, soft tissue bruising. She watched his face as she spoke, calibrating. He's under anesthesia now. We'll splint and pin, then observe for head injury signs. Cale's hands were fists without him realizing. Who brought him? EMS. A 911 call from, we don't know. Anonymous. He was found on your ex-wife's property. She paused, choosing. We documented abrasions around the ankle. Circular. Consistent with restraint. The last word was quiet, professional, obscene. Cale stared at the floor. A scuffed tile, a dark shoe print. He lifted his eyes. I need to see him. She studied him a beat, weighing rules against a father's face, then nodded. Briefly. Pre-op hold. They scrubbed him into a narrow alcove where the world shrank to beeps and cloth. Liam lay small under a blue drape, hair damp, lashes stuck together. A tube curved from his hand like a question mark. Even sedated, his mouth held worry. Cale touched the edge of the sheet with 2 fingers, afraid his weight would break it. Hey, soldier, he whispered. I'm here. Liam didn't wake. He didn't need to. Cale saw the red, raw indentation around the ankle where skin met bone, saw the faint line of a handprint fading along a forearm. Heat built behind his eyes. He blinked until it cooled into something harder. A nurse brushed past. We're rolling him now. Her voice softened. He said your name until he fell asleep. Cale stepped back, letting the gurney glide toward the doors. As it reached the threshold, Liam made a small sound, not quite words. Cale leaned. What, buddy? Key. Liam mumbled deep in the fog. He keeps a key feed bin. The doors swallowed him. Dr. Klein walked Cale to a bench and sat with him as if they had all the time in the world. We're mandated reporters, she said gently. We've notified CPS and the local PD. Good. The word was flat as steel. She held his gaze. You can't go in the OR. You can stay here, or wherever you need to be. There was the permission nobody would write on paper. Cale looked down the corridor where his son had disappeared, then toward the exit where the night waited, patient. If he wakes, if anything changes, I'll call you myself, she said, already writing her cell on a card. And Sergeant, he'll need you calm when he wakes. I will be. He wasn't sure it was true. He stood anyway. In the lobby, the security guard stepped closer. Sir, the nurse said to keep an eye out. He hesitated. You expecting anyone unwelcome? Cale pictured Vance's truck nosing into this circle of light, pictured that half smile. If he comes, Cale said, don't be a hero. Call it in. Lock the doors. Outside, the wind had teeth. Cale crossed the parking lot with his shoulders set and his jaw tight. The city's glow pooled low on the clouds of false dawn. He slid into the MP sedan and stared at his hands on the wheel. They look steady now. Feed bin. Key. He started the engine. Hospital, he told himself, then house, then barn. He pulled out into the empty street. Every turn already mapped. Every shadow a question he planned to answer. The gravel crunched under the MP sedan's tires as Cale turned onto the familiar dirt road leading to Mara's house. The night was still, the kind of quiet that made every sound ring louder. The engine hum, the soft squeak of the suspension, his own steady breathing. The barn came into view first, its roof a dark, jagged silhouette against the faint glow of the horizon. Cale slowed to a crawl, headlights off now. The house was dark, no porch light burning, no sound of movement. His pulse picked up. Vance's truck wasn't in the driveway. Either he wasn't here, or he was waiting. Cale parked by the tree line and stepped out, boots sinking into the cool dirt. The air smelled of hay and old wood. The barn door was open just a sliver, creaking faintly as it swayed in the wind. He drew closer, rifle case slung across his back, every muscle wound tight. Inside, the barn was a cavern of shadows. Moonlight cut through the slats, painting pale stripes across the hay-strewn floor. Somewhere, something clinked, faint metal on metal. Cale's breath caught. "Liam," he called low and controlled. A small whimper answered from the far corner. Cale's flashlight snapped on, beams slicing through the dark. The light found his son, barefoot, shirt dirty and torn, one ankle chained to a post sunk deep into the ground. Liam flinched at the sudden light, then blinked up, and relief broke across his small, swollen face. "Dad." His voice was cracked from crying. Cale crossed the barn in 3 strides, dropping to his knees. The chain was a thick, rusted length of iron with a padlock, biting into the raw skin of Liam's ankle. Cale's hand shook as he pulled a bolt cutter from the rifle case, snapping the lock in 2 brutal bites. The chain fell. Liam collapsed into Cale's arms, clinging with a desperation that made Cale's chest ache. "It's okay," Cale said, his voice rough but steady. "You're safe now." Liam buried his face in Cale's shoulder. He said he'd come back. He whispered, voice so small it barely reached Cale's ear. Cale's jaw locked. He scanned the barn quickly. Signs of struggle were everywhere. Hay flattened where Liam had sat, splinters near the post, scuff marks on the floor where small feet had fought to get free. Cale stood, lifting Liam carefully. The boy's leg was splinted from the hospital, his face streaked with dried tears. Cale shifted him against his chest, rifle strap digging into his back. He carried Liam out of the barn and toward the house. The front door was unlocked. The house smelled faintly of coffee gone cold. Cale laid Liam gently on the couch, covering him with a throw blanket. "Stay here," Cale said softly. "I'll check the house." Liam nodded, exhausted, gripping the blanket like a shield. Cale moved through the rooms one by one, clearing them with the precision of muscle memory. Kitchen empty, bedroom door ajar, bathroom light off. He found no sign of Vance. When he returned to the living room, a light clicked on in the hallway. Mara stood there in an oversized sweatshirt, hair messy, eyes wide. "Cale," she said, startled. "Where is he?" Cale asked, his voice low and hard. Mara froze. "He left hours ago. He said he'd be back." Cale stepped closer, noticing faint bruises on her wrists, finger-shaped marks half hidden by the sleeves. Her lips trembled. "I told him Liam was scared," she whispered. "He said it would teach him respect." "I didn't think." "You didn't think?" Cale snapped, then bit it back. He couldn't waste time on blame. Not yet. Mara's eyes darted toward the window. "Check the shed," she said suddenly, almost in a whisper. "He keeps things there. I've never gone inside, but you should look." Cale didn't answer. He grabbed the keys from the kitchen counter, eyes on the yard. The shed sat near the edge of the property, dark and square against the night. He turned back once. Liam's eyes followed him from the couch, wide and afraid. "I'll be right back," Cale promised. Then he stepped into the yard, the night air colder now, and walked toward the shed, every step heavier, every breath tighter, as though the earth itself was bracing for what he was about to find inside. Cale reached the shed and paused, hand on the handle. The night was too still. Even the crickets had gone silent. The shed's padlock hung open, swaying slightly, as if someone had been here recently and left in a hurry. His gut twisted. He pushed the door open. The hinges groaned. The smell hit him. Oil, dust, and something metallic underneath. Cale flicked on his flashlight, sweeping the beam across the cluttered space. Garden tools leaned crooked against the wall. Bags of feed slumped on the floor. At first glance, it looked like any old shed. But then he saw them. Chains hanging on nails, coiled neatly like someone had prepared them. A length of rope, frayed but recently cut. A dirty rag, stiff with dried sweat, knotted in the corner. Cale crouched and pulled open a wooden feed bin. Inside were loose bolts, nails, and a small key taped under the lid. Liam's voice echoed in his head. He keeps a key feed bin. Cale closed his fist around it, cold metal biting into his palm. He almost left, but something about the floor caught his eye. One board near the back was cleaner than the others, less dusty. Cale knelt and pried it up with the tip of his knife. The wood came loose with a soft crack. Beneath it lay a plastic folder, carefully wrapped against moisture. Cale's breath slowed as he opened it. Inside were photos, dozens of them. The first was of Liam, asleep in his bed, dated 3 weeks ago. Then another, Liam riding his bike, someone watching from a distance. Then more, photos of other children Cale didn't recognize, taken in parks, driveways, outside schools. Cale's fingers trembled, rage crawling up his spine. This wasn't punishment. This was hunting. Behind him, gravel crunched. Cale turned sharply, flashlight cutting across the yard. Mara stood a few feet away, pale in the beam, hands clutching her sweatshirt. "What is this?" Cale asked, voice low, dangerous. Mara's face crumpled. "I didn't know. I swear. I thought he was just strict, controlling. He told me not to come out here. I should have looked." Cale stepped toward her, photos still in hand. "You live here with him. You let Liam sleep under the same roof." "I was scared of him too," she snapped suddenly, voice breaking. "You think I don't know what he's capable of? Look at my wrists, Cale. He hurt me whenever I said no." Cale stopped. The bruises were darker now under the harsh light. She wasn't lying. "Then you need to pack a bag and take Liam to the neighbors," Cale said finally, voice like stone. "Now, I'll deal with Vance when he comes back." Mara hesitated, fear flashing across her face. "What if he finds us before?" Headlights cut across the yard, blinding for a split second. The low rumble of a truck engine rolled toward them. Cale's jaw locked. "Go," he said sharply. "Take Liam and go now." Mara bolted for the house. Cale stayed where he was, the flashlight now off, letting his eyes adjust to the dark. The truck door slammed. Vance's voice carried across the yard, casual, almost mocking. "Mara, you up? Where's the boy?" Cale stepped into the open, silhouetted in the moonlight. His rifle hung from its sling, his posture calm but coiled. "You're not taking another step," Cale said, voice flat. Vance froze. For a beat, the only sound was the wind sliding through the grass. Then Vance smiled, slow, crooked, but Cale caught it, the flicker of unease in his eyes. "You came back early," Vance said, tone light. "Guess the army really does drop everything for family, huh?" Cale didn't answer. He just took one step closer, letting the tension stretch until the air itself felt ready to snap. Vance's boots scraped on the gravel as he shifted his weight, that mocking half-smile still fixed on his face. The truck's headlights cut Cale and the shed into stark silhouettes, throwing long, sharp shadows across the yard. Cale kept his stance loose, but ready, one hand near the rifle sling. "Where's Mara?" Vance asked finally, voice almost playful, like he was testing how far he could push. "She's gone," Cale said evenly. "So, is Liam. You're done here." Vance chuckled under his breath, low and humorless. "You think you could just walk back in and take over? He's my responsibility now." "Your responsibility?" Cale's voice stayed quiet, but there was an edge now, a thread of steel. "You chained my son to a post. That's not discipline. That's a crime." Vance's smile faltered just a hair. He had it coming. Sneaking around, lying to his mother. "Say one more word." Cale cut in, stepping forward into the beam of the headlights. His shadow loomed over Vance now, the quiet rage in his stance more dangerous than shouting could ever be. For the first time, Vance looked rattled. He glanced toward the barn, then toward the road as if calculating his options. Then a second pair of headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. A dark SUV rolled in silently, stopping just short of the truck. Cale's finger twitched near the safety of his rifle, but before he could raise it, the driver's door opened. Detective Ross stepped out, jacket unbuttoned, badge glinting faintly under the moonlight. "Stravik," Ross said, voice calm but firm. "Stand down. We need him alive." Cale blinked, thrown by the words. "You're here for him?" Ross nodded, eyes locked on Vance. "We've been running an investigation for months, tracking his movements, building a case. Tonight was supposed to be the night he led us to his buyer." Vance cursed under his breath, his easy bravado gone now. Cale's pulse pounded. "And you let him keep coming here? Let him near my kid?" Ross held up a hand. "We didn't know about Liam. We thought this place was just a stash point." The call from the hospital blew our cover. Behind them, more doors opened. Two plainclothes officers stepped out, hands hovering near their weapons. The yard felt suddenly smaller, the night air charged. Vance took a slow step backward toward the barn. "You don't have enough to hold me," he said, though his voice wasn't as steady as before. Ross's tone hardened. "Try me. You've got evidence all over this property, and we've got on record." Cale's jaw was tight enough to ache. He looked at Vance, then at Ross. "You had months to stop him. Months while he was taking pictures of my son sleeping. While he was chaining him in here." Ross's face didn't change, but his eyes softened. "I get it, Sergeant. Believe me, I do. But if you take him out right now, we lose the entire network. We need him talking." Vance's eyes flicked from Cale to the tree line. Then he bolted. Cale reacted instantly, muscle memory kicking in. He tore after him, boots hammering the dirt. Vance hit the edge of the property and sprinted into the woods, branches whipping behind him. Cale's world narrowed to the sound of pursuit. His own breath, the thud of his boots, Vance's frantic scrambling. The woods were thick, moonlight catching on leaves and broken limbs, but Cale moved like a machine, steady and relentless. Somewhere behind him, Ross shouted for backup, but Cale didn't stop. He wouldn't lose Vance tonight, not after what he'd done to Liam. Vance stumbled over a root, went down hard, then scrambled to his feet again. Cale was gaining now, closing the gap with every stride. "Stop running," Cale barked, his voice cutting through the trees. But Vance didn't stop. Cale lunged, slamming into him from behind. They went down in a tangle of limbs, dirt spraying. Cale pinned him, one hand on the back of his neck, the other ready to strike if Vance so much as twitched. "Get off me!" Vance spat, face grinding into the dirt. "You chain my son," Cale growled, every word carved out of stone. Somewhere behind them, flashlights bobbed through the trees, Ross's team closing in. Cale's chest heaved, rage and control warring inside him. For a split second, he considered ending this right here. But Liam's face flashed in his mind, scared, bruised, needing him whole, not locked in a cell. By the time Ross and the others reached them, Vance was still pinned, breathing hard. Cale stepped back just enough for the cuffs to snap on. "Get him out my sight," Cale said, voice flat. Ross nodded to his team, then gave Cale a long look. "You just saved us a manhunt, and maybe a few more kids." Cale didn't answer. His heart was still hammering, his knuckles scraped raw. Somewhere beyond the trees, the barn door creaked in the wind, a hollow reminder of where it had all started. Ross's team hauled Vance to his feet. The cuffs clicked, the last of his swagger drained away. Cale stepped back, chest still heaving, dirt under his nails, fighting the urge to finish what he'd started. Flashlights jittered through the trees as more plainclothes officers fanned out toward the yard. "Walk with me," Detective Ross said low. He angled Cale toward the edge of the clearing, away from Vance's muttering. "You need to hear this before you decide anything you can't take back." Cale's jaw worked, but he nodded once. "We've had him under surveillance 3 months," Ross began. "We thought your ex's place was a stash site. Meetups at odd hours, short stays, burner phones, no patterns except one. He always came back to the barn after a drop. We were waiting for tonight's buyer." He studied Cale's face. "We didn't know about Liam until the hospital called." Cale's voice was flat. "He was in pre-op. I saw him. Then I found him chained here, with a splint. Ross's gaze flicked to an officer approaching with a tablet. Show him. On screen, St. Bart's corridor. A quiet frame turned chaotic. Alarm lights strobing, staff pivoting. A man in ill-fitting scrubs, mask, cap. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was pushing a gurney. A small boy under a blue sheet. In the next frame, the gurney disappeared into a fire stairwell. Pulled a false alarm, Ross said. 90 seconds of confusion was all he needed. He followed the ambulance in, switched scrubs from a supply cart, rolled Liam out before the OR doors locked. Dr. Klein realized it within minutes and called it in. And called you. Heat rocketed up Cale's spine. Guilt hit just as hard. He'd left to get ahead of it, to control the ground back here. Exactly what Vance had counted on. So he took my kid from the hospital to bring him back to Cale swallowed. To wait for a buyer. Ross didn't sugarcoat, or to keep him quiet if he'd seen something. But you arriving early changed his timeline. He nodded toward the shed. What did you find? Chains. Photos. Cale handed over the plastic folder, the edges bending under his grip. Kids. Not just mine. Ross flicked through the images with gloved fingers, face going still. We have names for 2 of these. Missing persons, different counties. This is enough to open the floodgates. He looked back up. We need Vance breathing. He's a courier, not the top. If he talks, we can pull the rest. Cale let that settle, the word courier snagging like a burr. Liam said there was a key. Feed bin. He pulled a small taped key from his pocket. Stamped on the bow, a storage unit number, a road name. Ross's brows lifted. That's our drop box. He signaled an officer. Secure that. Quietly. A radio crackled. House is clear. The woman and the boy moved to the neighbors on the east fence line. They're safe. Cale exhaled for the first time since the tackle. He glanced toward the dark shape of the house, saw, through a gap of trees, a porch light 2 properties over Wincon. For a second, he wasn't a soldier or a witness. He was just a father who needed to touch his son's hair and hear him breathe. Go, Ross said, reading him. 5 minutes. Then get back. We're setting a perimeter. If the buyer shows and doesn't see Vance, he might try the shed anyway. Cale jogged the fence line, vaulted once, landed in dewy grass. The neighbor's screen door creaked. An older man stepped aside without a word. Inside, Mara sat at a Formica table, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking. Liam dozed on a couch, legs splinted, blanket up to his chin. The sight punched through Cale's armor. He knelt, brushed a curl from Liam's forehead. The boy stirred, didn't wake. Mara's voice was a scrape. Is he? Cuffed, Cale said. He didn't soften it. Ross thinks there's a buyer coming. He wants him too. Mara flinched. There were calls at night, she whispered. He'd go out to the shed and talk low. Said it was work. When I asked who you saw, her sleeves inched up. The bruises spoke. Cale looked at her for a long beat, some anger cooling into something colder and clearer. When this is over, Liam doesn't come back here. She nodded without defense. I know. He squeezed Liam's shoulder once more, then turned for the door. On the porch, the eastern sky had the faintest ash-gray seam. Morning thinking about arriving. The night, though, wasn't done. Back in the yard, Ross had drawn a rough map in the dust with a penlight. 2 positions near the shed, one at the drive, one on the back meadow. No sirens unless it goes bad, he said. Playing cars a mile out. If the buyer's cautious, he'll park on the road and walk. He'll go for the bin or the floorboard. He won't expect us. Cale checked his rifle's sling and the knife he'd used to pry the board. He won't expect me either. Ross studied him, then gave a tight nod. You stay on me. No solo runs. Cale didn't promise anything. He took his place in the shadows anyway. Eyes on the barn and the black mouth of the shed. Somewhere, crows shifted in the trees, unsettled. A far-off engine murmured, then faded. Wind toyed with the open padlock, making it tick against the door like a low metronome. Cale listened to it, counting the beats between breaths, holding himself still. Across the yard, Vance sat in the back of the SUV, head bowed, for once out of Cale's reach. It would have to do for now. The farm held its breath. The next man who walked into that shed was either going to prison or into the dark with Cale. The yard was so quiet it felt alive. The barn loomed like a black tooth against the paling horizon, to shed a darker shadow at its edge. Cale crouched behind a hay rake, breath slow, rifle resting lightly across his knees. Every creak of wood, every rustle of leaves stretched like it was happening under a microscope. Ross stood 10 yards away, radio pressed to his ear, murmuring to his team. The SUV with Vance sat at the far end of the property, its windows dark, two officers flanking it like statues. Inside, Vance was slouched low, face turned away, but Cale swore he could still feel the man's eyes on him. Minutes crawled. A farm dog barked somewhere far off, then stopped abruptly. Cale's pulse picked up. He heard it before he saw it. The faint grind of tires on gravel, slow, deliberate, like someone who didn't want to be heard but couldn't hide a pickup's weight. Ross caught his eye, gave a subtle nod. Headlights didn't crest the hill. Whoever it was had killed him early. The engine cut. Then silence. Cale's hand closed on the rifle grip. His breathing slowed to match his heartbeats. He heard footsteps now, deliberate, unhurried, crunching down the driveway. A figure appeared at the edge of the yard. Tall, hood up, moving with the casual gait of someone who believed they were safe. The man crossed to the shed and crouched by the feed bin. Ross's voice was a whisper over the radio. Hold. He hasn't touched anything yet. Cale's jaw tightened. He remembered Liam's voice, remembered the chain biting into that small ankle. His finger rested against the trigger guard, itching. The man reached under the lid and pulled out a second key. Smaller, brass, glinting faintly in the early light. Then he turned toward the floorboards. Now, Ross said. Flashlights snapped on, slicing the dark. Officers closed in from 3 angles, guns drawn. Police. Hands where we can see them. The man froze for a half second, then bolted. Not toward the road, toward the barn. Cale was already moving. He sprinted across the yard, boots hammering the dirt, closing the distance fast. The man shoved the barn door wide and dove inside. Cale followed, rifle raised. The barn swallowed the light. Dust swirled in Cale's beam, glowing like ash. Somewhere inside, something clattered. A bucket kicked over in the rush. Stop! Cale barked, voice echoing off the rafters. The man's shadow darted toward the loft ladder. Cale lunged, grabbed him by the ankle, yanked hard. The man went down face first into the hay, the keys skittering away. In seconds, Ross and his team were inside, flashlights converging. They flipped the man over, pinned his wrists, cuffed him. Cale stepped back, chest heaving. Under the hood was a stranger's face, lean, sharp, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Not Vance's buyer, Cale realized. Someone lower in the chain. Ross crouched, yanking the hood all the way back. We know who you are, he said coldly. You're done. The man sneered, even with his cheek pressed to the hay. You think he's the last? There are others. Ross's jaw tightened. Then you're going to tell me where to find them. Cale's stomach turned. He glanced around the barn, at the post where Liam had been chained, at the marks in the dirt where he'd struggled. The man on the ground had walked in here like he owned the place, like it was just another night at work. Outside, the first thin light of morning spilled over the fields, washing the yard pale. Officers led the man out toward the SUV, his shoes leaving long drag marks in the dirt. Cale stayed where he was, alone in the barn for a moment. The smell of hay was sharp, the air damp with night. He crouched by the post, ran his fingers over the raw wood. He saw Liam's face again, pale, scared, whispering. He said he'd come back. Cale's hand closed into a fist against the floor. He had one man cuffed, another locked in the SUV, but somewhere out there was the rest of this chain, and if Ross was right, they wouldn't stop just because tonight went bad. When he stepped out of the barn, Ross was waiting by the SUV. That key he grabbed? Ross said, we traced it. It opens a storage unit 2 counties over. Probably where they keep whatever they don't risk leaving here. Cale's eyes hardened. Then we go there next. Ross studied him for a long moment. You sure you want to see what's inside? Cale looked back at the barn, then toward the neighbor's house where Liam was sleeping. I have to. The sky was streaked with gray now, the night giving way. But for Cale, the hunt wasn't over. It was only getting started. The convoy rolled out just after dawn. 2 unmarked SUVs led the way, Cale riding shotgun in the second with Ross at the wheel. The countryside blurred past, fields slick with dew, barns sagging under years, lonely gas stations still closed. Cale sat rigid, every muscle tight, rifle case across his knees like a reminder. Ross glanced at him. The key tags to a unit in Grant County, registered under a fake name. We've been circling it for weeks, waiting for tonight. With Vance in custody and this runner caught, it's time. Cale's eyes stayed on the road. What do you expect to find? Ross hesitated. Evidence. Maybe worse. These people don't move product through banks or ledgers. They use whatever holds weight. Cale gritted his teeth. You're telling me Liam was collateral? Ross didn't answer. He didn't have to. The storage facility squatted at the edge of a small town. Rows of corrugated doors painted dull green. A chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The guard shack was empty, Sunday shift abandoned. The convoy pulled inside and stopped in front of Unit 19. Ross held up the brass key, its number etched deep. This is it. Cale stepped out, boots crunching gravel. The morning sun glared off the metal doors, making his eyes water. His pulse drummed in his ears as Ross slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The door groaned upward. At first, it looked ordinary. Shelves stacked with boxes, a few plastic bins, a tarp covering something large in the corner. But the air was wrong. Stale, acrid, tinged with the sharp tang of disinfectant and something sour underneath. Ross's team fanned out, flashlights cutting through the dim. One officer pulled the tarp back. Underneath sat a row of duffel bags, neatly lined. Inside, burner phones, passports, wads of cash wrapped in rubber bands. Another officer opened a plastic bin. The smell hit first, a sickly sweet rot. He recoiled, gagging. Inside were toys. Small ones. Dolls with matted hair. A child's backpack, faded blue. Cale felt his stomach twist. He pushed past, deeper inside. On the back wall hung a corkboard, pinned with Polaroids. Some were blank landscapes, parking lots, playgrounds. Others weren't. Children. Different faces, different towns. Some sleeping, some playing, all unaware. And in one photo, half-shadowed in the corner, Cale saw Liam again. This time on the porch of Mara's house, eating ice cream. Taken from the tree lean. Cale's breath came short, fury rising like a tide. He ripped the photo from the board, crushing it in his hand. Behind him, Ross's voice was grim. This isn't just Vance. He's a spoke in the wheel. This unit links them across counties. Buyers, runners, scouts. Whoever owns these photos. They're higher up, smarter, and they'll know by now something's wrong. Cale turned, face carved from stone. Then we hunt higher. Ross studied him carefully. We'll need more than rage, Sergeant. We'll need proof. Enough to tear the whole thing down. Cale shoved the photo into his jacket pocket. Then let's get it. An officer came forward with a laptop bag, pulled from one of the duffels. Inside was a hard drive, cables wrapped tight. Ross's eyes sharpened. This could be it. If we crack it, we see their network. Cale's voice was low. And if it shows my son was on their list, every name behind it goes down. Ross didn't argue. He closed the bag and signaled his team to sweep the rest. Cale stepped back into the sunlight, blinking hard. The air outside was fresher, but it didn't clear the weight in his chest. Across the lot, the horizon burned gold, but to him it felt like a false dawn. He imagined Liam waking up at the neighbors, asking for him, maybe smiling faintly when he saw him. Cale tightened his grip on the rifle case. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Ross joined him by the SUV. We'll process this at headquarters. Tonight, we move again. The people expecting that drop? They'll come looking. Cale slid into the passenger seat, eyes locked on the fading green doors of Unit 19. Let them, he said, and as the convoy pulled away, he knew, before this ended, someone else would come to that farm. Someone worse than Vance. And Cale would be waiting. The drive back from Grant County was heavy with silence. Ross's team had packed the hard drive, cash, and photos into evidence crates, but the air inside the SUV carried a different weight, the knowledge that they had just peeled back one layer of something vast. Cale sat rigid, eyes locked on the passing fields. Every fence post blurred into the next. His hand kept brushing the folded photo in his pocket. Liam on the porch with ice cream, a lens watching from the tree lean. Whoever took that shot hadn't just been scouting. They'd been close. Ross broke the silence. We'll set up a safe house. Your son and Mara need to disappear for a while until we sort the chain. Cale turned, jaw tight. No, Liam doesn't go into another strange house. He stays where I can reach him. Ross frowned. Sergeant, if they know you've rattled their drop site, they'll come looking. The farm is compromised. Cale's stare didn't waver. Then let them come. I'll be waiting. Ross exhaled, frustrated but didn't push. By the time they pulled into Mara's property, dusk had fallen again. The barn stood in silhouette, darker than the night around it. Porch light glowed faintly from the neighbor's house across the fence. Cale's chest eased only when he saw Liam through the window, curled under a blanket on the couch, still safe. But as Ross's men unloaded evidence, one officer froze, hand to his earpiece. We got movement, he said, voice clipped. Where? Ross demanded. Roadside, half a mile out. 2 vehicles, no lights. Parked and staying put. Cale's pulse kicked. His instincts told him what this was, a test. The network checking to see why their drop hadn't gone through. Ross's team fanned out, setting a perimeter. Radios crackled with quiet updates. Cale crossed into the neighbor's kitchen, where Mara stood, wringing her hands. They're out there, aren't they? She whispered. Cale glanced toward Liam, asleep in the next room. Yeah, but they're not getting near him. Mara's eyes filled. This is my fault. I let Vance stay. I thought. Cale cut her off, voice low but sharp. Right now, it doesn't matter what you thought. What matters is keeping Liam breathing. You stay quiet, you stay inside. If I tell you to move, you move. Her chin trembled, but she nodded. Back outside, Cale joined Ross near the barn. The night pressed close, heavy with waiting. They won't sit out there all night, Cale said. They'll test the ground. Ross nodded grimly. We'll let them come far enough to hang themselves, but no further. You stay in cover. You don't engage unless it's life or death. Cale's answer was flat. If they step into that barn, it's life or death. As if summoned, the first crunch of footsteps drifted from the field. Figures, 3 of them, moved low across the grass, dark shapes with careful steps. No flashlights. No voices. Professionals. Cale's breath slowed, the way it always had before an ambush. His rifle was already shouldered, eye to the scope. He could see them clearly now. Masks, gloves, carrying nothing obvious but moving with purpose. One broke off, heading straight for the shed. The other 2 angled toward the barn. Ross whispered into the radio, hold positions. Wait for my mark. But Cale's focus narrowed. He saw one man's hand slide to his pocket, pulling something small and metallic. Not a weapon, a lighter. The man struck it, testing the flame, then tilted his head toward the barn. Cale's blood ran cold. They weren't just scouting. They were here to burn it, to wipe the ground clean. Ross, Cale hissed, they're going to torch it. Liam sent his blood, everything. Ross cursed under his breath. All units move. The night erupted. Flashlights blazed. Voices shouted. Boots thundered through grass. The masked men bolted, scattering in 3 directions. Cale locked onto the one with the lighter, sprinting after him before Ross could stop him. Branches whipped his face as he chased through the tree-line, every stride fueled by something rawer than duty. The man vaulted a ditch, stumbled, then spun with a knife flashing in his hand. Cale didn't break stride. He hit him full force, the knife skidding harmlessly into the dirt as they rolled. Pinned beneath him, the man snarled through his mask. You think this ends with us? He was only the first. They'll keep coming. Cale's fist drove into his jaw, silencing him. He pressed the rifle muzzle under the man's chin, chest heaving. For a heartbeat, he teetered on the edge, the urge to pull the trigger almost absolute. But Liam's face flashed in his mind again, whispering in the hospital, Dad? Cale's hand trembled, then steadied. He slammed the man's head against the dirt instead, leaving him limp. Behind him, Ross and his officers closed in, securing the others. Radios crackled with the word, 3 in custody. Cale rose, chest burning, eyes scanning the dark tree-line for more. But the night was quiet again. Too quiet. And deep in his gut, Cale knew this wasn't victory. This was warning. The yard looked like a war zone by dawn. Three masked men sat cuffed against the barn wall, their heads bowed, breaths ragged. Ross's team moved in tight circles, securing evidence, radios chattering low. The smell of smoke still hung in the air from the lighter that never touched the wood. Cale stood apart, rifle slung, but his hands restless, knuckles still raw from the chase. His eyes kept drifting to the barn. The chain's gone now, the post bare, but in his mind he saw Liam curled there, whispering he said he'd come back. Ross approached, dark circles under his eyes. They're runners, same as Vance. Low level. We squeezed two already. They gave us something. Cale's head snapped toward him. What? Ross handed him a crumpled slip of paper pulled from one man's pocket. A time. A location. Midnight. Dockside, 50 miles south. That's where the buyers were expecting to meet Vance tonight. Ross said grimly. They'll show again, just later. Different face, same deal. If we intercept, we get higher on the ladder. Cale stared at the paper. Midnight. A line in the sand. Then I'll be there. Ross's jaw tightened. This isn't your op. You're a father in the middle of it. You're too close. Cale's voice was flat. Too close is the reason my son's alive. I go. Ross held his gaze, then looked away. Fine. But you stay on me. No cowboy moves. We need them alive. Cale didn't answer. He was already seeing the dock, already hearing the water slap against pylons, already tasting the iron tang of vengeance. Later, in the neighbor's house, Mara tried to speak. She sat at the table, face gray, hands trembling around a mug she hadn't touched. Cale, she whispered, I need you to understand. Vance, he didn't just walk into my life. He was sent. Cale froze. Sent. She nodded, tears brimming. After you deployed, a man came to me at work. Said he had friends who could help around the farm. Said he knew what it was like to raise a kid alone. That man was Vance. I thought it was coincidence. But last month he slipped. He said he'd been watching us long before we met. Watching you. The room tilted. Cale's stomach nodded. This wasn't just about Liam. This was about him. Ross arrived minutes later, called by Mara's confession. He listened silently, his face darkening. She's right. Files from the storage unit confirm it. They weren't just scouting kids. They were targeting military families, soldiers overseas, kids left behind, single parents vulnerable. Vance wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a plant. Cale's fists clenched at his sides. Every deployment, every late-night call, every goodbye to Liam. Had they been watching from the start? Ross leaned forward. This isn't just about saving Liam anymore. This is about dismantling the system that put Vance in your home. Midnight is our chance. We miss it, they vanish. Cale's mind was a storm. He looked toward the couch where Liam slept, face peaceful for the first time in days. And he knew what was coming. A choice. Stay here, guarding his son with his own hands, or go to that dock and face the men who had turned his family into prey. For a long moment, the weight of both futures pressed down. Then Cale spoke, voice steady, carved from something deeper than rage. I'll go. Because if I don't, he'll never be safe. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Ross gave a short nod, as if he'd expected no other answer. Then gear up. Tonight, we finish it. The sun climbed higher, washing the fields gold, but Cale felt no warmth. He stood at the window, watching Liam stir under the blanket, whispering in his sleep. Cale's chest ached, torn between staying and leaving. But his hands didn't tremble anymore. His decision was made. Midnight at the docks, the heart of the network, and Cale Stravik would be waiting. The docks at Grant's Wharf were a skeleton of steel and shadow, creaking under the weight of the tide. Midnight hung heavy, fog curling low across the water. Cargo cranes stood like dead giants against the pale moon, their arms frozen. Cale crouched behind a stack of rusted containers, Ross beside him, whispering into a radio. Four of Ross's team were spread across the perimeter, eyes on the central pier where the meeting would go down. At the far end of the dock, headlights blinked twice. A black SUV rolled up, tires whispering against the planks. Two men stepped out, dressed too neatly for dock work. Press coats, polished shoes that glinted faintly. They moved with the calm arrogance of men used to controlling the ground. Cale's pulse pounded. Every instinct screamed at him to move, but Ross's hand clamped his arm. Wait. Another engine growled. A second SUV approached from the opposite side, windows tinted. This was supposed to be Vance's role, delivering whatever proof the network had stored in the barn and the unit. Instead, the men who'd come were about to realize something was wrong. The first pair waited, hands in pockets, shoulders squared. One of them called out, his voice carrying through the fog. "You're late." The second SUV stopped. A man climbed out, face hidden under a cap. He didn't speak, just walked forward, a duffel bag in his hand. Ross whispered, "That's not Vance. That's a substitute." Cale's eyes narrowed. He recognized the walk. Careful. Military. His blood ran cold. The man lifted his head, just enough for the dock light to hit his face. Not a stranger. Not a buyer. Captain Dyer. Cale froze. His commander. The same man who had looked him in the eye in the desert, ordered him go. For a moment the world tilted sideways. Ross swore under his breath. "He's ours. Army intelligence. Embedded." Cale's breath hitched. "Embedded." His voice was acid. "You're telling me he's part of this?" Ross didn't answer. Eyes locked on the dock. Dyer set the duffel down and unzipped it. Stacks of cash, burner phones, more photos. "Proof of life," he said flatly. "You'll get the rest once we confirm the shipments." Cale's chest burned. Shipments. Kids weren't collateral, they were cargo. And his commander wasn't hunting the network, he was feeding it. Ross hissed, "Stand down, Stravik. We need him alive. If we spook him, we lose everything." But Cale was already moving. He slipped from cover, every stride silent until his boots hit the wooden planks. His rifle was up, eyes locked on Dyer. The two buyers turned at the sound, startled. Dyer's eyes met Cale's across the fog. Shock, then something colder, sharper. "Cale," he said, voice carrying, steady as ever. "You shouldn't be here. You sent me home." Cale growled, advancing. "You knew. You planted him in my house. You put Liam in chains." Ross shouted from behind, "Stravik, stop!" But Cale didn't stop. His rifle stayed, trained on Dyer, finger brushing the trigger. The buyers froze, caught in the crossfire, their arrogance drained. Dyer didn't flinch. "You don't understand, Sergeant. Men like me don't follow missions. We write them. The families of soldiers? Always overlooked, always exposed. That vulnerability is worth more than gold. Why waste it?" The words slammed into Cale like bullets. His vision tunneled, the fog around them narrowing into a single point. His commander, his betrayer. Ross surged forward, gun raised. "Put down, Dyer. It's over." But Dyer only smiled faintly, as if the game was already won. "You can't stop what you don't understand." Cale's heart pounded, finger tightening. The twist wasn't just that Vance was a plant. It was that the man who had ordered him home, the man who wore the same uniform, who saluted the same flag, had been orchestrating the nightmare from the start. The dock held its breath. One wrong move, it would all detonate. Fog thickened over the water, swallowing the dock in a damp hush. The only sound were the creak of wood beneath boots and the faint slap of tide against pylons. Cale's rifle was steady, trained on Dyer. Behind him, Ross's team fanned out, guns drawn on the buyers. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Dyer raised his hands slowly, his calm voice carrying. "Stravik, you've seen the scope now. This isn't one man, one farm. This is a system. You kill me, someone else takes my place tomorrow. But if you stand down, if you let this play, you and your son walk free. Untouched. No more deployments, no more targets." The words slithered into the air, tempting, poisonous. Cale's jaw clenched. He could still see Liam's ankle, raw and ring from iron, still hear his boy's small voice in the hospital. "Dad, you think I'd trade my son's safety for every other father's nightmare?" Cale's voice was a rasp. "No deal." Ross shouted, "Dyer, drop the act. We've got your network in pieces." Dyer's eyes flicked to Ross, then back to Cale. "And who do you think gave me the power to build it? You really believe it stops here? We're protected, Sergeant. You shoot me, and they'll bury the evidence before sunrise. But if you let me walk..." Cale's finger tightened on the trigger. Rage and reason warred inside him, every muscle taut. He had seen enough men bluff death to know when one meant it. Dyer wasn't bluffing. The buyers shifted nervously, one muttering in a foreign accent, "This is finished." "He's compromised." They moved for the SUV. Ross barked, "Stop them." His team surged, tackling both men before they reached the door. Shouts and cuffs snapped through the fog. Dyer's faint smile faltered. For the first time, he looked cornered. "You'll never protect him," Dyer hissed. "Liam will grow up a target. Unless you make it end here." Cale stepped closer, muzzle inches from the man's chest. His breath shook, his mind flashing through years of orders given and followed. Every salute, every mission. He saw it now. Every time he left Liam behind, men like Dyer had been counting on it. Ross's voice cut through the storm in Cale's head. "Stravik, don't. Alive, he burns the whole system. Dead, he's just a ghost." Cale's eyes locked on Dyer's. "You put a chain on my son." He lowered the rifle 1 inch. Then his fist shot forward, slamming into Dyer's jaw with all the weight of weeks of fury. The man dropped hard, teeth rattling against wood. Ross's team swarmed, cuffing him, reading rights through gritted teeth. Cale staggered back, chest heaving. He hadn't pulled the trigger. But for once, that felt like the harder choice. By dawn, the dock was a hive of flashing lights and evidence bags. The buyers were loaded into vans, Dyer shoved into a separate car, his comm mask cracked. Ross moved among his men, directing, but his eyes kept flicking to Cale with something between respect and relief. "You saved us the case of a lifetime," Ross said quietly. "And maybe more kids than we'll ever count." Cale didn't answer. He stood at the edge of the pier, watching the sun claw over the horizon. For the first time, the fog began to lift, burning away in streaks of gold. Back at the neighbor's house, Liam stirred awake on the couch. His leg was heavy in the splint, but when he saw Cale step through the door, his face broke into a tired smile. "You came back," Liam whispered. Cale knelt, pulling him close. "I always will." Mara stood in the kitchen doorway, eyes red, guilt etched deep. She started to speak, but Cale shook his head. "Later. Right now it's just him." Liam clung tighter. "Is it over?" Cale's throat tightened. He looked at his son, at the bruises still healing, and thought of the doc, of the photos, of how wide the network really stretched. "It's over for him," Cale said, meaning Dyer, meaning Vance, meaning the men who had touched their lives. Then he kissed the top of Liam's head and held him as though the world could never pull them apart again. For the first time in days, Cale let his eyes close. The fight wasn't done, but for this moment, in the morning light, father and son had survived. And that was enough.